The grand throne hall of the Xylarian Empire glittered with cold light. Rows of alien nobles stood tall, their jeweled robes trailing across the floor, their sharp eyes fixed on the human standing in the center. Marcus was a soldier from Earth, taken long ago after a failed war. To the aliens, he was nothing more than a servant, a reminder of humanity's defeat. At the far end of the hall, the alien king sat on a throne of black stone. His voice boomed through the chamber, mocking and cruel. "Human, you speak of honor, of worth. Yet what have you done? Your people crawl in the dust. Perhaps," he smiled, his teeth glinting, "perhaps you deserve a reward." Laughter rippled through the hall. Marcus clenched his fists but held his silence. The king raised his hand and guards dragged forward a small figure. A young alien girl stumbled, her body fragile. One leg twisted, her eyes downcast. Whispers filled the room. She was the king's daughter, but she was known only as the Broken One. Born weak, she had been hidden away, a shame to her father's pride. "Take her," the king said mockingly. "She is useless to me. A cracked jewel, a crippled child. Let this be your prize, human, my broken daughter. Perhaps she will match your broken race." The hall erupted in cruel laughter. The girl flinched, tears shining in her pale eyes. She did not resist, but her trembling revealed years of pain. Marcus's jaw tightened. He could feel every gaze on him, waiting for him to refuse, to bow his head in shame. Instead, he stepped forward and gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "I'll take her," he said firmly. The laughter stopped. The king leaned back in surprise. "You accept?" Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "She's not broken. She's yours, which means she has worth. And I'll prove it." The king chuckled, waving his hand dismissively. "Then she is yours. Raise her, feed her, do as you like. It will amuse me to watch you fail." The guards shoved the girl into Marcus's arms. She was light, far too light, as if she had been starved. Her eyes, a soft silver, refused to meet his. She whispered, barely audible, "You don't want me." "No one does." Marcus bent down slightly so she could hear his steady voice. "They see weakness. I see strength waiting to be found." The girl blinked at him, confused. No one had ever spoken to her that way. As Marcus guided her out of the hall, the nobles whispered and sneered. The king's laughter echoed behind them, mocking and cruel. But Marcus ignored it. He focused only on the fragile hand that clung lightly to his arm, the trembling girl who had been cast aside like garbage. Outside the throne hall, in the cold corridors of the palace, Marcus paused. He knelt so he could look into her eyes. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Liara. Liara," he repeated softly. "A strong name. Don't forget it." Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. She lowered her gaze again, but something small stirred in her chest, a spark she hadn't felt in years. That night, Marcus carried Liara to the quarters assigned to him, a small stone chamber at the edge of the palace grounds. He set her down gently, brought her food, and sat quietly as she ate. She stole quick glances at him, trying to understand. Why was he being kind? Why didn't he push her away like everyone else? When she finished, she whispered again, her voice shaking. "They're right. I'm broken. You'll see." Marcus shook his head. "No, I don't see broken. I see someone who's been pushed down so many times she forgot how to stand. But I'll help you stand again." For the first time, Liara looked at him fully. Her silver eyes were filled with disbelief, but also with the faintest trace of hope. Outside, the palace echoed with cruel laughter and schemes, but within that small chamber, something different began to grow. A human who refused to see weakness, and an alien girl who had never been seen as anything else. Neither knew it yet, but this was the moment everything would change. The days after the throne hall were quiet but heavy. Liara sat in Marcus's small quarters, curled in the corner like a shadow. She barely spoke, barely moved, and when she did, it was always with the same look of shame on her face. Her twisted leg made walking painful, and years of neglect had left her body frail. The alien king had given her away to humiliate Marcus, and everyone in the palace knew it. Servants sneered when they passed. Nobles whispered cruel jokes, and guards laughed openly. "The human has taken the king's trash," they said. Marcus ignored them all. He kept his focus on Liara. Each morning he set food before her. At first she wouldn't eat unless he turned away, but slowly she grew used to his presence. Each night he adjusted her bedding, making sure she was warm. And when she whispered apologies for being a burden, he always answered the same. "You're not a burden. You're Liara." Still she doubted. One evening, as the light from the moon spilled through the small window, she asked him softly, "Why do you care? You are a servant. I am broken. Together we are nothing." Marcus crouched in front of her, his voice calm but firm. "You're wrong. You're not nothing. And broken doesn't mean worthless. It means there's something to rebuild. Something to grow stronger than before." Her silver eyes widened slightly as if she wanted to believe but didn't know how. The next morning, Marcus pushed a small wooden staff into her hands. She stared at it, confused. "What is this?" "Support," he said. "You've been told you can't stand. Let's prove them wrong." Liara's face paled. "I will fall. They will laugh. Then we'll fall together," Marcus said simply. "And when we rise again, they'll see." His steady voice gave her courage she didn't know she had. Hesitantly, she leaned on the staff and tried to stand. Her legs shook, her arms trembled, and after 2 steps, she stumbled. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground. Tears filled her eyes. "I told you." "I can't," he shook his head. "Not yet. But you will." Every day they tried again, step after step. Sometimes she fell. Sometimes she refused. But Marcus was always there, lifting her back up, never once mocking, never once turning away. Slowly, her body began to change. Muscles that had long been weak grew firmer. Her balance steadied. And one evening, under the silver glow of the moons, Liara managed to walk the length of the chamber without falling. When she reached the far wall, she turned, her chest heaving, her silver eyes bright with something new, pride. Marcus clapped once, smiling. "There, see? Strength." Liara's lips trembled. She had never smiled before, but now she did. Small, fragile, but real. "Strength," she whispered, almost tasting the word. Word of her progress spread through the palace like wildfire. Nobles came to watch, expecting her to fail. The alien king himself visited, seated on a smaller throne brought into the training court. His laughter echoed as Liara limped across the floor, staff in hand. "Look at her," he sneered. "My broken daughter pretending to be whole. And this human, teaching her tricks like a child with a pet." The nobles roared with laughter. Liara froze mid-step, shame flooding her body. Her grip on the staff faltered. She wanted to run, to hide again. But then she saw Marcus at the far end of the court. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't mocking. His eyes met hers, steady and unshaken, silently reminding her of his words, "You will." Her trembling eased. With a deep breath, she pushed forward, her leg dragging but her step steady. 1, 2, 3, until she stood before her father's throne. The hall went silent. The alien king leaned forward, his smirk faltering for a heartbeat. "Interesting," Liara's silver eyes met his. For the first time in her life, she didn't lower her gaze. Marcus smiled softly from across the court. She had not only walked, she had stood tall in front of the one who had always called her broken. The alien king chuckled darkly, masking his unease. "So the human has taught you to limp with pride. Let us see how long it lasts." But Marcus saw it differently. This was no limp. This was Liara's first step into strength, and he knew, no matter how much the king mocked, no matter how much the nobles laughed, Liara would never be broken again. The training court was empty now, but Liara's steps still echoed in her mind. She had stood before her father without collapsing, and for the first time, she had not lowered her gaze. The memory made her chest feel strange, like a fire she had never known before. Marcus saw it too. That night, as they sat in the dim light of their small chamber, he spoke softly. "You walked in front of them all. That was courage. Now we make sure they can never push you down again." Liara tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Marcus picked up the wooden staff she had been using to walk. He held it out to her, spinning it in his hand with ease. "It's more than support. It can be a weapon." Liara's silver eyes widened. "A weapon? But I—" She looked at her frail arms, then down at her twisted leg. "I can barely stand. How could I fight?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Fighting isn't just strength. It's timing, balance, and heart. You've got more of that than anyone here." She hesitated, but finally took the staff from him. Her grip was clumsy, but Marcus guided her hands, showing her how to hold it. Step by step, he taught her how to block, how to swing, how to use her weight instead of fighting against it, how to block, how to swing, how to use her weight instead of fighting against it. At first, every movement felt wrong. Her arms shook, her legs wobbled. But Marcus never lost patience. Every time she faltered, he repeated the same words. Again. You will. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Liara's movements grew sharper. Her strikes gained rhythm, her balance steadied, and her confidence began to bloom. For the first time in her life, she felt control over her own body. One evening, after hours of practice, Marcus handed her a small piece of fruit as a reward. She stared at it, puzzled. Why this? Because you earned it, Marcus said simply. Her silver eyes shimmered, and she whispered, No one has ever said that to me. But while Liara found strength, the alien king grew restless. Reports of his daughter's progress reached his ears. At first he laughed, then he frowned, and finally he scowled. This human dares to give her pride? He thundered in the throne hall. Does he think he can undo her weakness? Very well. If he claims she is strong, let her prove it, the nobles murmured eagerly. They loved cruelty dressed as spectacle. The king raised his hand. Prepare the arena. Tomorrow the human's little project will face a test. Let the galaxy see whether she is still broken. The next morning, guards dragged Marcus and Liara into the vast arena. Thousands of aliens filled the seats, their voices booming in anticipation. The alien king sat on his high throne, his cruel smile sharp as a blade. Marcus leaned close to Liara as they entered the sandy pit. Stay calm. No matter what happens, trust yourself. Trust me. Liara's hands trembled on her staff, but she nodded. The king's voice thundered through the arena. Behold, my broken daughter given to a human like trash claims she has learned strength. Today we test this foolishness. The gates opened. From the shadows emerged a hulking beast, scales glistening, jaws dripping with venom. Its roar shook the arena, sending chills down Liara's spine. The crowd roared with laughter and cheers. To them, this was entertainment. Liara's silver eyes widened in terror. I can't. Her staff shook in her hands. Her legs nearly gave out. Marcus grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. You've stood before your father. You've walked when they swore you couldn't. This is no different. You're stronger than you think. Tears burned in her eyes. But if I fail, then I'll stand with you, Marcus said firmly. But I know you won't fail. The beast roared again, charging across the sand. The crowd screamed in delight. Liara gripped her staff tighter, her heart pounding. For a split second, she thought of running. But then she remembered Marcus's words. Not broken, stronger than before. Her fear twisted into defiance. She planted her staff into the sand and stood her ground. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat as the broken daughter of the alien king raised her head high and faced the beast. Marcus smiled faintly. The test had begun. The beast's roar rattled the walls of the arena, its hot breath steaming in the air as it charged across the sand. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting for blood. High above, the alien king reclined on his throne, his cruel smile never fading. Liara's body shook so hard she nearly dropped her staff. Her twisted leg buckled, fear clawing up her spine. I will die here. I will prove them right. Liara! Marcus's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He stood at the edge of the arena, fists clenched, eyes locked on hers. Look at me. She tore her gaze from the beast for a heartbeat and met his. His face was steady, his voice unshaken. You are not broken. You are stronger than you believe. Stand. The beast's claws slammed into the sand, throwing dirt into the air. Liara staggered but tightened her grip on the staff. The monster lunged. Liara leapt aside, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. The crowd laughed, calling her movements pathetic. But Marcus shouted over them. You moved. You chose to live. That's strength. Her chest heaved. She scrambled to her feet, staff raised. The beast turned, its eyes burning red, and charged again. Liara tried to block, but the force knocked her sprawling across the sand. Pain tore through her body. The king laughed. Pathetic child. Even with a human's help, you are still nothing. The words stabbed into Liara's heart, the same words she had heard her whole life. Broken. Worthless. Nothing. But then Marcus's voice rose again, loud, defiant, echoing across the arena. You are not nothing, Liara. You are everything they fear. Show them. Something cracked inside her. The years of humiliation, the loneliness, the cruelty, all of it boiled into fire. She forced herself to her feet, blood on her lip, staff trembling but unbroken. The beast lunged a third time, jaws wide. Instead of running, Liara planted her staff in the sand. bracing with every ounce of strength she had. The beast's head slammed against the wood, the force nearly toppling her, but she held on. The arena gasped. With a cry that tore from her soul, Liara twisted the staff, shoving it into the beast's jaw. It reared back, shrieking. She stumbled forward, striking again and again, each blow fueled by years of pain and Marcus's faith. Her arms screamed, her leg burned, but she didn't stop. At last, with one desperate swing, she drove the staff into the beast's eye. It collapsed with a final roar, its body shaking the ground. The arena fell silent. Liara stood in the center, chest heaving, silver eyes blazing. Her staff dripped with blood and dust, her small frame trembling but unbowed. For the first time in her life, the crowd was not laughing. They were staring. Marcus's smile spread slowly. He shouted with pride, "That's my Liara!" Her eyes locked on his, tears mixing with sweat. For a heartbeat, she forgot the thousands watching. She only saw him, the one who believed when no one else did. High above, the alien king's smirk faltered. His daughter, the broken one, had slain a beast in front of all. He leaned forward, his jaw tight. But then he forced a chuckle, masking his unease. "Impressive trick, human. You've made her useful. But a beast is not a battle. Let us see if she truly survives the games to come." The nobles cheered again, eager for more cruelty. Liara lowered her staff, her body shaking with exhaustion. But inside, something had changed forever. She had not been carried. She had not been hidden. She had stood, fought, and won. As the guards dragged the beast's corpse away, Marcus rushed into the arena, ignoring the protests. He reached her side, catching her before she collapsed. "You did it," he whispered fiercely. "You proved them wrong." Liara clutched his tunic, her silver eyes shimmering. "I am not broken." Marcus shook his head, smiling through his own tears. "No, Liara, you never were." The crowd watched in silence as the human held the alien king's daughter in his arms, not as a shame, not as a weakness, but as something far greater. And though the king laughed again to cover his anger, Marcus knew the truth. A fire had been lit in Liara that no one could ever put out. The arena still smelled of blood when Liara returned to her chamber that night. Her body ached, her staff was splintered, and her twisted leg throbbed with pain. Yet for the first time, she did not collapse into the shadows of shame. She sat tall, silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Marcus sat across from her, tending the burns and bruises on his own arms. He smiled quietly. "You fought like a warrior." Liara's lips trembled. "I fought like someone who did not want to be nothing anymore." Marcus reached across the table, his rough hand covering hers. "You've never been nothing, Liara. You just needed the chance to see it." She stared at their joined hands, her heart pounding with a new rhythm, one that felt like hope. But high above in his private chambers, the alien king paced with fury. The nobles' whispers echoed in his ears. She stood. She fought. Perhaps she is not broken after all. The king slammed his fist onto the table. "The human defies me. My daughter defies me. I will not allow it." An advisor bowed low, then crushed them both, announce a second trial, one they cannot possibly win. The king's lips curled into a cruel smile. Yes, if she believes herself strong, let her face warriors, not beasts. Let her fight in the royal games. The court cheered at the decree. By morning, the announcement spread across the empire. The broken princess would fight trained soldiers before the eyes of thousands. When Marcus told Liara, her face paled. "Soldiers? Trained killers? I can't. Marcus, I can't fight them." He knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. You said the same about walking. You said the same in the arena, and every time you proved yourself wrong." Her silver eyes filled with fear. "But what if I fail? What if they kill me?" Marcus's voice softened, but his gaze stayed firm. "Then I'll fall beside you. But Liara, you won't fail, because strength isn't just about winning. It's about refusing to bow. And you've already done that." Her chest tightened, and for the first time she nodded without hesitation. "Then teach me. Make me ready." Days of training followed. Marcus drilled her relentlessly, teaching her not just how to swing her staff, but how to anticipate, how to move, how to use her twisted leg to her advantage. "You think it slows you," he told her one afternoon, "but it makes you unpredictable. Use it. Let them underestimate you." Liara practiced until her arms shook, sweat pouring down her lavender skin. Each time she faltered, Marcus was there, steady as stone. Again. Stronger. You will. At night she collapsed into her bedding, exhausted but alive. And in her dreams she no longer saw herself as broken. She saw herself standing tall, staff in hand, Marcus at her side. She saw herself standing tall, staff in hand, Marcus at her side. The day of the royal games came swiftly. The arena was filled to bursting, nobles and soldiers cheering with anticipation. At the center stood Liara, her staff polished but simple, her body still thin but her eyes fierce. Marcus stood just beyond the gates, his fists clenched. He wasn't allowed to fight beside her this time, but his presence burned in her heart. The alien king rose, his voice booming. Behold, my daughter, once broken, now claims strength. Let her prove it. Face my chosen warriors. The gates opened and 3 armored soldiers marched into the arena, weapons gleaming. They circled her like predators. Liara's grip tightened on her staff. Fear churned in her stomach. But then she heard Marcus's voice in her memory. Use what they underestimate. Refuse to bow. When the first soldier lunged, she stepped aside, her twisted leg giving her an awkward angle that threw off his strike. Her staff cracked against his helmet, sending him sprawling. The crowd gasped. The second soldier attacked, but she ducked low, spinning her staff and striking his knee. He collapsed with a roar. The third came with fury, slashing his blade down. Liara blocked with all her strength, the impact rattling her bones. Her knees buckled. For a heartbeat, she nearly gave in. Then she saw Marcus at the gate shouting above the roar. Liara, you are not broken! Her fear snapped. With a cry, she shoved the soldier back and struck his chest with both hands on her staff. He fell hard into the sand, his weapon clattering away. Silence filled the arena. Liara stood in the center, chest heaving, staff steady in her hands. 3 soldiers lay defeated at her feet. The nobles erupted into chaos. Cheers, gasps, outrage. The alien king's face darkened, his pride shattered in front of his people. But Marcus only smiled, pride shining in his eyes. Liara lifted her staff high, her silver eyes blazing. She was no longer the king's broken daughter. She was his greatest shame and Marcus's greatest victory. The roar of the crowd still echoed long after the royal games ended. Liara stood tall in the arena, staff in hand, with 3 soldiers defeated at her feet. Her silver eyes burned with pride, her breath sharp but steady. The nobles shouted in disbelief, some cheering, some enraged, but none could deny what they had seen. The alien king sat frozen on his throne, his cruel smile gone. His broken daughter had risen before all, not as shame but as strength. His pride burned like fire. When the cheers faded, he stood slowly, his booming voice silencing the hall. Enough. His gaze locked on Liara. You may have survived this day, but do not mistake this for victory. You are still mine. You will always be mine. Liara met his gaze, her jaw trembling but her back unbent. For the first time, she did not look away. That night, in the shadows of his chamber, the king raged. His advisors bowed low as he paced like a beast. She shamed me before the empire, he growled. And worse, the human has turned her against me. One advisor spoke cautiously. Then remove the human. Without him she will crumble. The king's eyes narrowed. Yes, her strength is not hers, it is his. End him and she will break again. Orders were whispered in the dark. A secret decree spread to the guards. The human would not see the next dawn. But Marcus was no fool. He had seen the king's fury, the way his eyes had burned. That night he sat awake in the small chamber he shared with Liara, sharpening his knife in silence. Liara stirred from sleep, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. You are not resting. Marcus glanced at her, his face calm but grim. They'll come tonight. For me? Her heart clenched. She pushed herself up, gripping his arm. No, if they come for you, they come for us both. Marcus shook his head gently. Liara, you've proven yourself. You don't need me anymore. You can stand now. Her voice cracked louder than she intended. No, I can stand because of you. Don't you dare leave me. Marcus blinked, surprised at the fire in her tone. She was trembling, not with fear, but with defiance. You told me I was not broken, she said, tears shining in her eyes. But Marcus, if you fall, I will be shattered again. I will not let them take you. Before he could reply, the sound of boots echoed in the corridor. Torches flickered against the stone. They're here, Marcus muttered, rising to his feet. The door burst open. Guards flooded in, weapons drawn. Their leader sneered. By decree of the king, the human dies tonight. Stand aside, girl. Liara stepped forward, planting her staff in the ground. Her silver eyes blazed. You will not touch him, the guards laughed. You think you can stop us? You, the king's crippled shame? Liara's voice rang with steel. I am no shame. I am his daughter, and I will protect what he gave me away to lose. The first guard lunged. Liara swung her staff, striking his helmet so hard he dropped to the ground. Another charged, but Marcus was there, his knife flashing in the firelight. The chamber erupted into chaos. Liara fought with a ferocity she had never known, every strike fueled by rage and love. Marcus moved beside her, steady and sure, his blade cutting through armor. But the guards were many, and the room filled with the clash of steel and the cries of battle. Marcus took a blow across his side, stumbling, blood soaking his tunic. Liara cried out, striking down the attacker with all her strength. She knelt beside Marcus, her hands shaking as she pressed against his wound. Stay with me. He gritted his teeth, forcing a smile. I'm not done yet. The remaining guards hesitated. They had expected a broken girl and a weak human. Instead, they faced a warrior princess and a fighter who refused to fall. With one final cry, Liara raised her staff high. Go back to the king, tell him I am not broken. Tell him I choose him, she pointed at Marcus, not his chains. The guards faltered, fear flickering in their eyes. One dragged the fallen leader back and the rest retreated into the night. Silence fell. Liara dropped to her knees beside Marcus, her body trembling with exhaustion. She pressed her forehead against his, her voice breaking. I will not lose you. Do you hear me? I will not. Marcus, pale but breathing, cupped her cheek with a bloody hand. You won't. Because you're stronger than both of us put together. For the first time, Liara held him, not as a burden, not as a shame, but as her choice, high above. The alien king seethed when he heard the guard's report. His daughter had stood against him. She had chosen the human over her own blood. His pride cracked into fury. Then she is no daughter of mine. If she will not bow to me, she will fall with him. The king's armies began to stir, and in the quiet of their chamber, Marcus and Liara clung to each other, knowing the greatest battle was still to come. The throne hall of the alien king had never been louder. The crowd of nobles filled the balconies, leaning forward with cruel excitement. The great drums pounded, echoing like a storm through the vaulted chamber. Soldiers lined the walls, armor gleaming, spears ready. At the center stood Marcus and Liara. The human's body bore the scars of countless battles, but his hand still rested on his knife with steady confidence. Beside him, Liara clutched her staff, her silver eyes glowing in the firelight. She limped, her twisted leg dragging, but her stance was firm. On his throne of black stone, the alien king rose slowly, his cape spilling across the steps like a river of blood. His voice shook the walls. My daughter, the shame of my blood, dares to defy me, and a human servant stands at her side. This insult ends now. He drew his massive blade, its edge gleaming red. Kneel, girl. Bow to me, and perhaps I will let your human die quickly. Liara's grip on her staff tightened. Her voice rang out unbroken. I will never bow again. The crowd gasped. Marcus smiled faintly. That's my girl. The king roared and descended the steps, his blade swinging down with the force of a hammer. Liara raised her staff, the clash ringing like thunder. The impact drove her to her knees, her arms screaming with pain. See? The king spat, pressing harder. You were born weak. You will die weak, but Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. Liara, you're not weak, you're unpredictable. Use it! Her silver eyes snapped to his, and suddenly she understood. She twisted her stance, her limp becoming her weapon. Her uneven movement threw off the king's rhythm. She sidestepped, her staff cracking against his ribs. The crowd erupted. The king staggered back, enraged. You dare strike me? Liara's voice rose, trembling but fierce. You mocked me. You gave me away. You called me broken. But he... She pointed her staff toward Marcus. He saw what you never did. He saw me. The king lunged again, his blade slicing the air. Liara ducked low, spinning her staff, striking his knee. He stumbled. She pressed forward, each strike faster, sharper, fueled by every year of pain turned into fire. Marcus shouted encouragement at every blow. Yes, again! Don't stop. Her staff cracked across the king's jaw, his blade arm, his chest. At last she drove the staff hard into his chest, sending him crashing onto the black stone floor. His crown fell rolling across the hall. The nobles gasped, their whispers filling the silence. The alien king, undefeated for decades, lay sprawled at the feet of the daughter he had cast aside. He looked up at her, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. You were nothing. Liara raised her staff high, her body trembling, but her voice steady. I was never nothing. I was only unseen. And now the galaxy will see me. The king's eyes burned, but his power was gone. The crowd erupted into chaos, some calling for punishment, others cheering Liara's defiance. For the first time, voices rose not in praise of the king, but in awe of the daughter he had tried to erase. Marcus moved to Liara's side, catching her as she sagged with exhaustion. He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice soft. You did it. You're unbreakable now. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she smiled through them. No, we are. Together they turned their backs on the throne. The alien king's reign cracked that night, not from armies or weapons, but from the courage of the daughter he mocked and the human who refused to let her fall. And as they walked out of the throne hall, hand in hand, a new story began to spread across the stars, that even in the heart of cruelty, weakness can become strength, if someone dares to believe. The throne hall still echoed with the clash of battle, though the fighting had ended. The alien king remained slumped on the black stone floor, stripped of his power, his crown rolling uselessly into the shadows. The nobles whispered among themselves, no longer laughing, no longer mocking. Fear and doubt spread like wildfire. Liara leaned on her staff, her chest heaving. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, steadying her against the weight of exhaustion. Together they turned their backs on the throne and walked out of the hall. No one dared stop them. Outside, the palace corridors were eerily quiet. Servants peeked from behind doors, their wide eyes filled with awe. Soldiers lowered their weapons as the pair passed. The sight of the broken daughter standing tall beside a human shook them more than any army ever could. By the time Marcus and Liara stepped into the moonlit courtyard, a small crowd had gathered. Whispers rippled through the people. She stood against him. She defeated the king. The broken one is not broken. Liara tightened her grip on Marcus's hand, her silver eyes shining in the night. For the first time, those eyes no longer looked down in shame. They met every gaze, steady and proud. Days turned into weeks. The empire stirred. Word spread quickly across the stars. Of a princess once cast aside who had risen against her father. Of a human who had turned weakness into strength. Of a bond stronger than chains or cruelty. In distant colonies, slaves whispered her name with hope. In hidden camps, rebels told her story by firelight. Even among the king's armies, doubt crept in. If the broken daughter could stand, why couldn't they? Within the palace, Marcus and Liara made their home in the old chambers once sealed away. Marcus tended to her wounds, still training her each day, not for survival, but for leadership. Liara walked the halls with her staff like a banner of defiance. One evening, Marcus found her standing on a balcony, staring out at the sprawling city below. Fires dotted the horizon where protests were already breaking out. They're fighting, she whispered. Because of me. Marcus stepped beside her, his voice steady. Because you showed them that chains can break. You gave them something no king ever could, hope. Her silver eyes shimmered, her voice soft. I was once ashamed to even walk. Now, they look to me. What if I fail them? Marcus reached for her hand, his grip warm and firm. You won't. Not because you're perfect, but because you've already stood when no one thought you could. That's enough to make them believe. And belief changes everything. For a moment, Liara leaned against him, her heart steady. She had been given away as a joke, mocked as broken. Now she stood as a symbol of rebellion. But in the shadows, danger still brewed. Though weakened, the alien king clung to power, vowing vengeance. His loyalists plotted in secret, whispering of assassins and coups. He would not let his daughter and her human undo his empire so easily. Yet Liara no longer trembled at the thought of his wrath. She had faced him and won. She had found strength in her weakness and love in the place she least expected it. If he came again, she would not stand alone. One night, as the stars spread across the sky, Liara and Marcus sat by a small fire within the palace gardens. The air was quiet, heavy with the scent of blossoms. Marcus looked at her, his eyes soft. Do you remember what you told me when we first met? That no one wanted you? Liara gave a faint smile. And you told me I wasn't broken. You never were, Marcus said, his voice gentle. And now the whole galaxy knows it. Her throat tightened. She reached out, resting her hand against his. Then let the galaxy also know this. Her silver eyes locked onto his, filled with fire. That I am not my father's daughter. I am yours. Marcus's heart clenched, but he nodded. Together they leaned close, their foreheads touching. For a moment the world was quiet, and the rebellion, the throne, the empire, it all faded. Only the two of them remained. By dawn, messengers carried news across the stars. The broken princess was now the people's queen, not by crown, but by choice. And at her side was a human who had seen her worth when no one else did. Whispers of rebellion grew into a storm. The alien king's rule trembled on the edge of collapse, and in the heart of it all stood Liara and Marcus, not as shame, not as weakness, but as a promise that no one, human or alien, need ever bow again. For broken things, once mended, often shine the brightest.